Hello, thanks for tuning in. My name's Brian Streckfus, and I've been a guitar teacher for over a decade. And I'm going to be giving away some free lessons on YouTube to get the word out about some publications I released. So today is kind of a chord lesson. It is meant for beginners at the very beginning. I kind of want to do some YouTube videos to kind of get the word out. Because I do think this stuff is pretty good and a pretty novel take on things. You might have to pause the video and like muscle memorize this stuff for a while and maybe come back to it, to be honest with you, because it's obviously the hard part is like being able to switch between these. And maybe I'll give some advice on that in a little bit. You know, one problem maybe with chords on the internet is that you kind of feel like you're drinking information from a fire hose, and it just feels like random chords being thrown your way, and very little things actually explain what chord comes next. And that's understandable because it's an art. So, of course, any chord could come next. But we'll talk about what sounds good and what's most likely to happen. So, chords, for the most part, unless it's something super alien, it's basically just skipping every other letter name in music. So for C major, we have C, E, G. And then for D minor, we have D, F, A. And it's a D minor 6 because just to make it a little bit easier physically, if that bothers you, you can have a fret 3 right here. It's a little bit harder physically, but D minor 6 is a little bit jazzier. E minor, E, G, B. So on piano, this would look like skipping every other white key. F major, and notice we do it a 4th time because it's a 7th chord. This is why music is hard, because those numbers I said just didn't really make any sense. But the reason why it's called a 7 is because F to E is 7 letter names away. GBD. So it's kind of like we're building a chord for do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Should be 7 chords. Last one is diminished, B, D, F. Diminished is kind of a really weird oddball that sounds dissonant. It's not the most stable thing, for sure. I'll play it real quick. Maybe let me turn my guitar up a little bit. Kind of horror music sounding, haunted house sounding. So it's not really the most common chord in the world, unless metal music or classical music kind of uses a lot, but in pop music, it's sort of avoided, actually. I feel like a lot of people kind of underestimate how powerful this is, because if a song stays in key, and you know for sure that it doesn't switch key, they pretty much have to stick to these 7th chords. And then you might also be wondering, well, what about D major, and what about B flat major, and what about all the other ones? Well, if you use a capo, it automatically converts it for you. So you could have a capo at 2, and then this becomes a D major chord, and all the shapes stay the same. So capos are really nice. You get to select whatever key you want. So usually I recommend students do that kind of strumming pattern. Down, 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 up, down. And, you know, not with too much anxiety and not with too much rigidness, right? I'm not super stiff about it. It's kind of just a light brushing. People maybe obsess a little bit over, maybe not everybody, but like a lot of people obsess over like playing it all at once. You really don't have to. And playing it all at once takes a few months at least to sort of get that good. But a lot of times I'm actually weaving my way in and out of things. For example, bass note alone. Bass note alone strum gives you that one extra second to get to where you need to get. Or you could do arpeggios, more like water. I don't know why I want to call them waterfalls, but that's what I just call them in my mind. And it kind of reminds me of Bob Ross, where it's like, we paint a happy little D minor chord here, and we paint a happy little E minor chord here, and like wherever you want to plop it is like not that big of a deal. You know, of course, unless you're getting paid money to like do exact things, sure. But sometimes the ethos of pop music is that you're just told what chord to play for and how long to play it for. Just play an E minor chord for 4 seconds, and the details of that are up to you. I kind of like working that way in pop music. You can make that E minor chord as big as small as you want. You can strum it as fast and slow as you want, just as long as you take up 4 seconds and you switch with the band. So, you know, unfortunately, guitar is kind of it's kind of a difficult instrument. On piano, to be honest with you, this would have a bit more clarity because you would just be sliding up 3 fingers in pretty much the same shape every time, skipping every other white key. On guitar, unfortunately, it's almost as if everything was blended up in a blender. It's because our strings are tuned in fourths. So sometimes it's really, really hard to find consistency and sort of crack the code, because it's going to feel really, really random for a long, long time until like the puzzle pieces finally unite. Maybe I'll explain that more in another lesson where I have much more consistent chords, which I have already created, and I might as well shamelessly show myself, right? If you go on Sheet Music Direct and search for Brian Streckfus, you'll find over 100 things that I've made. And yeah, I have some chord charts on there that are much more consistent and much more like one shape for everything kind of feeling. But the problem with those is they're much more physically demanding, and they're not quite as suited for a beginner because there's not as many open strings. These are designed to be in a very friendly key with very friendly voicings, so that there's a lot of open strings. You kind of pay a little bit of a price for that, I guess, because it's more confusing mentally and music theory-wise, maybe. Really big piece of advice I have is there's something called tonic, predominant, and dominant. So the blue chords are called tonic, yellow chords are called predominant, and red chords are called dominant. Those words kind of probably don't mean a lot to everybody or anybody. So it's more like blue is relaxing. Yellow, it's starting to go on an adventure and feels more unstable. And red feels like the end of the sentence and unstable and very questioning and kind of uncomfortable. People want to, C major, F, we're starting to go on an adventure. G, ask a big old question, and everybody's waiting for you to go back to a blue chord. And we finally get to hear C, just like what our ears want it to be. One big piece of advice is that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is if you have somewhat decent ears and you can hear if the band is on a blue chord or a yellow chord or a red chord, it doesn't matter. You don't have to match it perfectly. You just have to match the color. So if somebody else is playing a C major chord and you play an E minor, it actually kind of harmonizes with itself okay. And the reason it does that is because we're just scooting a C right here. And it just ends up being C, E, G, B. But notice the letter names are still kind of stacked the way that they're supposed to be. You just end up with a jazzier chord. And it's sort of, I mean, it's kind of important because it changes the emotions, but at the same time, the function and the purpose of what it is isn't really changing. It's still like a relaxing chord that's probably at the beginning of the chord progression. I hope. At the beginning of the chord progression. I hope that that helps you, and that the next time you're listening to a song, you're just judging the relaxation and the tension of a song, and that you're able to know it's the beginning of the chord progression. Here it's relaxing. Play any blue chord you want. Maybe I'll just play a little bit just in case, if you're an absolute beginner, like I said, you might have to pause the video and get this muscle memory kind of going in order to be fast enough. But maybe I'll play like a little bit of something right now, just so that you have maybe an opportunity to harmonize over me. Of course, I won't hear what you're playing, but maybe I'll do another blue, A minor, moving on to yellow, another yellow soon, still yellow, red, G5, now B diminished, now scoot it, kind of like that. Now, right, we gotta resolve, back to blue. Notice that's one advice, is that like once you get to red, you're kind of backed into a corner into going back to blue. Now, music breaks the rules all the time, so it's not going to happen every time. But again, this just kind of helps your ears that, oh, they did resolve. So they probably resolved to some sort of blue. There's what we call deceptive cadences, which is maybe best left for another video, but like you could kind of surprise, maybe I don't go back to C major, I go back to E minor. And the notes sort of went where you were expecting them to go, in like a halfway kind of way, but like it was sadder than what you were expecting, especially if you got the audience's ears used to C major. And that's a powerful thing, right? Because you can kind of control people's emotions, right? You can kind of make them feel sadder than what they were supposed to be, and you can make them feel happier than, whoa, I'm happy all of a sudden. I was not expecting that happy chord. They're playing tricks on me, kind of thing. You can end on a red. That's called a half cadence. Right, kind of an awkward way to end though, right? Because it's on red, so I picture an audience feeling uncomfortable and be like, do I clap right now? Is the song over? So it's kind of why it's not done. But I mean, it's done a little bit, but I feel like it ending on red works better for like very ambitious and long pieces of work. It works very well for movies because the movie is an hour and a half long, and you kind of want to keep the audience in suspense, keep them on the edge of their seat, maybe make them feel uncomfortable in a weird kind of subliminal way. Or if you're writing a very long symphony that's an hour long, you could kind of have a lot of things ending on red just to kind of keep the music propelled forward and almost to prevent people from clapping, if that's what you want. One ticky-tacky little thing is having an open string here is not that big of a deal. This is, maybe a conversation that I'll get more and more into, but like sometimes there's a difference between practicality and perfect music theory. Guitar is just not great at having like perfect voicings that you can do it whatever you want. Sometimes Sometimes the most famous guitar chords are kind of just where the fingers naturally kind of lie. So that would be adding a G, and so that would be G, B, D, F. Notice the letter names still skip every other one. Basically turn that chord a little bit more jazzy. So notice that's kind of what I was saying. You can combine reds to kind of create a more jazzy chord. Because I know that chord's like a little bit tricky if you're playing with a pick, right? Kind of awkward to skip over that string, unless you're playing fingerstyle or you're doing hybrid picking. And hybrid picking means like you're holding a pick, but you're sneaking your ring finger or middle finger to kind of get the rest. I mean, one big piece of advice is maybe don't get greedy. If you're supposed to be landing somewhere on beat 1 and you really need to be on a chord, again, try not to obsess over getting a gigantic chord all at once. And some people are good enough to do that, right? But to me, it's not really necessary and could be slightly catastrophic if you're late. If you got greedy and you wanted to do a 6-note chord, then you end up being a second late because you chose such a large chord. But that's not really like a good role to have, right? Your role especially as a rhythm guitarist is obviously to set the rhythm. So if you're a second late, you might just kind of derail off the train tracks and the whole band gets kind of confused. It's like this juke move of like, do I match him and do I play my stuff a second later now? Or do I like reverse a second or, right? Maybe that's something to like talk about with your band. It's like normally I think the singer can mess up and I just have to match with the singer even if they mess up, and usually that's how I think. You know, in pop music they tend to switch to a new chord all at once. Totally fine. But more in classical music, it's more this feeling of slowly switching to chords. So you can kind of blend and mush these. It's all in the same key, right? So right, you can kind of combine them, almost like if you're throwing these in a blender or something, right? Putting that note there is not really going to hurt it. Putting that note here is not really going to hurt it. It's kind of like reverse engineering things. If the note worked before and the song doesn't change key, it's just going to continue to work. Right? I can force that C there. And people kind of struggle with that, right? Because this is an art and people are ingrained to try to find yes or no answers and very finite answers. But, right, it's an art. Part of the reason why I'm giving this lesson is to try to train people to like, you don't have to paint inside the boxes. And that's important to notice, right? Because we're literally looking at boxes that are telling you what to do. But there's a way to paint outside of them. Now, right, I could keep on going with examples, right? They all should work. Force that F from here, right, whatever. That'll free your mind and realize that there's 1,000 correct answers, you know. But at the same time, there's only 7 answers. You know, there's only 7 answers kind of reminds me of card counting a little bit. There's no such thing as having 5 kings in poker, right? You can't have quintuplet kings. It's kind of the same thing in music. There kind of is no 8th chord unless you go out of key, or unless, right, it's a fancy scale, right? And this video probably just doesn't have the time to get into fancy scales because this is meant for beginners. But another big advice along the same lines is force pentatonic scale over things. And maybe at this point in the video, I'll show it. Might just be faster to show it in post. So maybe I just won't even go to it right now. But pentatonic is 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3. So all of these should be zeros. This is a scale, right? So super important scale, especially for pop music. I almost don't want to talk about the pentatonic scale too much because it super deserves its own video and its own lesson and its own set of tips and advice. So maybe I'll just wait on that. Just understand that that shape can also be kind of mushed in to everything. That kind of helps because, like, instead of feeling very robotic, oh, I'm told to play F major for 8 seconds, instead of being like very robotic and unorganic, of just 8 quarter note down strums, right? You can use pentatonic to weave in and out of things and ornament chords, make the rhythm section a bit more beautiful. And again, it kind of just frees your mind. It's very enjoyable to feel like there's 10,000 correct answers rather than feeling like, oh no, I didn't play the right thing, no, I'm wrong. Improvising music is very fun. It's less stressful, and people tend not to beat themselves up as much, maybe. At least if you have kind of that free mind about it. Maybe one thing, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, that guitar is not a perfect instrument. On piano, it's just very easy to have like a perfect C, E, G here in sheet music and have it stack perfectly. So notice, I know sheet music is very intimidating, right? That's one, just to show my own stuff, right? I do use sheet music in a lot of my own stuff, but I also feel like what I release is extremely intuitive and almost doesn't require any explanation because I tab everything out and I diagram everything out, and I pretty much always have letter names. So if you can read tabs and diagrams and you somewhat know letter names, like you will be able to like use this stuff. So right, on piano, DFA, we can perfectly stack it on piano and it's not that hard. You try to do that on guitar and it's just a little bit harder because that's fret 5, fret 3, fret 2. So it becomes very, very fretted. And then EGB. So I guess I kind of mentioned it earlier, right? Where chords on guitar are like not this perfect music theory thing. Even though I love music theory, it's kind of just where the fingers lie and like just kind of how the cookie crumbled. And guitarists like chords that obviously are easy to play, not chords that are perfectly stacked. And plus perfectly stacked would be kind of boring anyways. It'd be like reading a book without a problem. So just understand that it's kind of jumbled up, and sometimes it's like an octave thing, that if you shift octaves around, you're going to wind up with a super correct version. For example, yeah, scoot this D up an octave. Then you get that perfect BDF stack. So this is why guitar is kind of a hard instrument to compose for, because sometimes composers that don't know guitar are like trying to take it easy on you, and they're trying to give you these very readable, easy, perfect, in order chords, but they actually end up being kind of hard to play on guitar. That could be like a long story, so I don't know how much I want to get into it, but like I said, you just kind of scoot around octaves until it kind of makes sense on guitar. And often guitar has a perfect fifth right away, kind of like this, 5 letter names away, kind of right off the bat. Guitar just lends itself to that, because that would be index and ring finger. a power chord. And right, it's just the tuning of the guitar lends itself to that being the first interval. And plus that's actually a good thing. It's because of the harmonic series, and you can look that up, but it's better to have big intervals at first, like an octave or something, and then slowly get the intervals smaller as you build the chord. So big gigantic leaps on the bottom of the chord, and then as you go up, it kind of gets smaller and smaller. I think human ears enjoy that because I think it's something in nature. I could be wrong about that, but if I hit a piano with a hammer or something like that, I just feel like that would be kind of what naturally comes out of it. Where having a cluster of notes in the bottom, right, it's going to sound real messy. Bass notes are going to clash. There's a low G and an A there, rubbing against each other. Now listen to it when I put it as a very high A. It's absolutely beautiful. Because we have that foundation of stability on the bottom of the chord, and we save the top end for the beautiful note, and then for the note that's kind of like pushing the harmony in a different direction. I kind of want to say a wrong note, but it's like a note outside of the chord. But notes outside of the chord are really important, again, because we don't want a book that has no problems. Just a G that's perfectly what it's supposed to be. It's great, but it's not really, doesn't really have a problem to it. It has no tension to it, right? If I have that note, you can hear the problem getting fixed. So I guess we'll stop there. Please like and subscribe at bell button all. Please look at the description for links where you can pick up some of this stuff. Website is sheetmusicdirect.com. You can search for Brian Streckfus. There will be links in the description. And like I said, I've made over 100 things: music theory, chords, scales, songs that are very easy to read and really don't require any training or that much, knowledge. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.